Most people spend their lives controlled by ideas they did not choose, beliefs handed to them, rules forced upon them, and a worldview designed to keep them obedient. But in this video, we confront the one forbidden text that shows you how power actually works, how elites shape human behavior, and why those who read it stop being followers. The problem we solve is simple: how to escape the mental prison society quietly built around you. There exists a book whispered about in private circles, never taught, never recommended, but always feared, not because it contains violence, but because it contains clarity about human nature, authority, and the invisible levers that gun the masses. The powerful understand that knowledge is the sharpest weapon, and this book does not comfort you, nor does it justify your illusion. Instead, it exposes the psychological machinery behind obedience, why people submit, why rulers rise, and why a single informed mind is more dangerous than 1,000 soldiers. Tonight, you will not merely read this forbidden text, you will dissect the architecture of domination hidden within it. You will learn why those in authority prefer you ignorant, and why those who desire freedom must devour every page with untamed hunger. This is not entertainment, this is instruction. And once you hear what's inside this book, you will never be ruled the same way again. Power does not begin with the sword, it begins with the story. Every society, every nation, every empire you have ever heard of, whether ancient Rome or the modern digital realm, rests on an architecture of control far more subtle than armies and walls. And you, whether you realize it or not, are standing inside that architecture right now. Ask yourself, when did you first learn what you were allowed to believe? Was it when you were a child, told what was right and wrong? Was it in school, where obedience was rewarded and questioning the system was quietly discouraged? Or was it in the present world, where information is infinite, but the acceptable opinions somehow remain very few? If you observe closely, you'll see that the most enduring rulers in history never relied purely on force. They relied on shaping the minds of the people so effectively that resistance became unthinkable. The Roman Senate learned this. So did the medieval church. So do modern governments and corporations. They all discovered the same truth: controlling behavior is secondary, controlling perception is primary. Consider Rome. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon with an army, but he secured the hearts of the citizens long before that moment. He cultivated an image of inevitability, of destiny. By the time he marched into the city, the people had already decided the outcome. His genius was not military, it was psychological. He mastered the art of appearing necessary. Now ask yourself, who appears necessary in your life? Who has convinced you they are indispensable? A leader? A system? A belief? Or something far more discreet, like a norm, a rule, a cultural expectation so invisible you never question its authority? This is the first layer of control, the illusion of natural order. If people believe something has always been this way, they rarely challenge it. But the second layer is even more powerful, the illusion of personal choice. A well-structured society makes you feel free while steering you exactly where it wants you. Look around. People choose what everyone else chooses. They prefer what they were instructed to prefer. They think what they have been rewarded for thinking. Control today is not enforced, it is incentivized. You think the algorithm merely shows you content? No. It teaches you desires, it shapes your fears, it builds your worldview, one invisible suggestion at a time. And all the while, you believe you are deciding for yourself. This is no different from the courts of Renaissance Italy, where advisors whispered into the ears of princes and guided their thoughts. Except now, the whispers are digitized, accelerated, and optimized. Instead of one advisor shaping the mind of a ruler, millions of minds are shaped simultaneously, quietly, efficiently, without protest. But here is the uncomfortable question: where do you stand in this structure? Are you the one designing the narrative, or merely consuming it? Most people imagine themselves free because they can choose between two options, option A or option B, but both options were placed there by someone else. Two doors, same hallway, same architect. The most dangerous individuals in history, dangerous to the powerful, that is, were not rebels with swords. They were thinkers who stepped outside the mental architecture completely. Socrates questioned the accepted truths of Athens. He paid with his life. Not because he was wrong, but because he was disruptive. He removed the illusion of certainty, and those who benefit from certainty do not tolerate such disruptions. The architects of control understand that a population asking the wrong questions is more threatening than a population carrying weapons. So they give you answers for questions you never asked. They give you heroes to admire, enemies to hate, narratives to accept, ideologies to echo, all perfectly arranged so you never step outside the frame. But here is the subtle brilliance. The architecture is not built around you to confine you. It is built to make you comfortable. People rarely escape what comforts them. Now pause and look inward. How many of your convictions are authentically yours, and how many are inherited blueprints you have never examined? This segment is not meant to condemn society. Society must structure itself. Order must exist. Rules must guide the masses, but the question remains, are you among the guided or among the guiding? We are about to step into the second keynote, where the walls become transparent, and human nature reveals itself as the most predictable force in the world. If you thought control was external, wait until you see the mechanisms inside your own mind. Human nature is not mysterious. It is mechanical, rhythmic, predictable in its flaws and desires. Those who rise above the masses are not stronger. They are simply more observant. They study the impulses that move people, the fears that shackle them, and the hopes that make them pliable. And if you wish to understand power, you must begin by understanding yourself. Ask yourself this: what command holds more strength, the one shouted in anger, or the one whispered into your own mind by your own emotion? The rulers of old learned a simple truth. People are not governed through force. They are governed through their own nature. A prince who understood fear and ambition wielded greater power than any general. Consider the battlefield at Agincourt. The English were outnumbered, yet victory was shaped not by weapons but by psychology. Henry V understood morale, fear, and the intoxicating effect of belief. He framed the moment as destiny. His men fought not just with steel, but with an inner narrative that made retreat feel like treason against themselves. In every age, those who can manipulate human nature shape history. Now turn inward. What forces steer your choices? Desire for approval, fear of rejection, the hunger for certainty. You navigate the world thinking these emotions are personal, but they are shared instincts, predictable patterns. This is why marketers, politicians, and seducers all tap into the same set of levers. They understand the script inside every human being. Do you truly choose what you want, or are you reacting to impulses planted long before you notice them? Think of the classic strategy used by merchants in Renaissance markets: scarcity. A merchant would display only a handful of goods, creating the illusion of rarity. Buyers, fearing loss, paid more. Today, the tactic survives in every limited time offer, every countdown clock, every only two left you see online. Human nature has not changed. Only the tools have grown sharper. And here lies the crucial insight. Your nature can be a weapon or a weakness. It becomes a weakness when you remain unaware of it. It becomes a weapon when you learn to anticipate your own reactions as if studying another person. Why does flattery work so consistently? It strikes at the universal longing to feel seen. Why does fear silence crowds? Because uncertainty paralyzes. Why do people follow confident leaders even when they doubt the leader's competence? Because confidence provides psychological shelter. You can watch these mechanisms unfold anywhere. Observe a room of people listening to a charismatic speaker. Their eyes track the gestures. Their posture shifts unconsciously. Their silence becomes synchronized. They tell themselves they are evaluating the speaker, but in reality, they are being calibrated by tone, rhythm, and presence. Long before the mind engages, nature responds. The strategist sees this clearly. He knows that human beings crave stories over logic, reassurance over truth, and belonging over independence. He does not condemn these tendencies. He uses them. Just as a sailor reads the wind rather than curses it, the strategist reads emotion rather than resists it. But what about you? How often are your decisions shaped by instinct rather than reason? How often do you act to avoid discomfort rather than pursue clarity? You may believe you are rational, yet most of your choices are emotional, compromises, bargains to maintain harmony with your nature. Understanding this does not make you cynical. It makes you aware, and awareness is the first step toward influence. You cannot influence others until you understand the strings that pull you. History's greatest tacticians mastered this art. They learned to predict reactions with precision. When Caesar pardoned his enemies, He did so knowing gratitude would weaken them more than punishment. When leaders today craft narratives of fear or prosperity, they do so knowing people respond more strongly to feeling than fact. So ask yourself, do you want to remain driven by invisible forces, or do you want to grasp the levers within yourself? Because once you master your own nature, you gain the power to read and shape the nature of others. And in the next segment, we step deeper into forbidden territory, where society's most suppressed truths reveal why knowledge itself becomes dangerous. There are truths that civilizations quietly bury, not because they are false, but because they are too sharp, too dangerous, too capable of waking minds that were meant to remain asleep. Forbidden knowledge has never been about content, it has always been about consequence. A truth becomes forbidden the moment it threatens the comfort of the many or the authority of the few. Ask yourself, why do societies hide certain ideas? Why do rulers fear certain books, certain philosophies, certain ways of thinking? Because once the mind learns to question the frame, it no longer obeys the picture inside it. In ancient Athens, the city executed Socrates not for violence, but for inquiry. His questions dissolved illusions faster than swords could defend them. He made the young see inconsistencies in the stories they were raised on. And a population freed from illusion is the one thing every power structure fears. What illusions surround you today? Which beliefs are so sacred you hesitate to question them, not because you think they're true, but because you fear what questioning them might cost you? Forbidden knowledge is rarely forbidden explicitly. Censorship today is elegant. Knowledge is not burned. It is buried beneath entertainment, outrage, distraction. The endless noise that keeps the mind too busy to wander into dangerous territory. Silence is no longer enforced from above, it is cultivated from within. You have been trained to avoid certain questions, trained to feel discomfort when you approach them, trained to mock those who explore them. This is not an accident, it is strategy. Look at history's most dominant empires. The Chinese dynasties restricted access to certain philosophical texts that challenged imperial authority. Medieval Europe kept scriptures in Latin, so only the elite could interpret the truth. Even modern states classify information not because it is incomprehensible, but because it would expose the machinery behind the curtain. A well-structured society knows that stability requires shared illusions. And illusions require that dangerous truths remain out of reach. But what exactly makes knowledge dangerous? It begins with perspective. Once you understand the psychological mechanisms behind persuasion, fear, desire, and obedience, you stop responding the way society expects you to. You stop reacting emotionally to political narratives. You stop worshipping the symbols of power. You stop believing authority is moral by default. Knowledge becomes a threat the moment it grants independence. Think of the classic tactic used by rulers across centuries. Control the story, and you control the people. Romans used myth and ritual. Kings used divine right. Modern societies use ideology, media, and curated outrage cycles. The tools change, but the strategy remains identical. Distract the mind from seeing the structure. But let us go deeper. Forbidden knowledge is not merely what society hides from you. It is what society teaches you to hide from yourself. Your darker impulses, your genuine ambitions, your instinct for self-preservation, your ability to see through manipulation. These are labeled dangerous, selfish, or immoral because a self-aware individual is harder to govern. Why? Because he sees the game. Most people do not. They navigate life with inherited beliefs and emotional reflexes, not awareness. They follow rules designed for their obedience, not their empowerment. And here is the strategic insight every powerful figure throughout history has understood. People voluntarily imprison themselves when they fear what lies outside the walls. So the most effective way to suppress truth is not force, it is framing. Convince people that forbidden knowledge is irrelevant, foolish, or corrupting, and they will exile themselves from it. But consider this. Every breakthrough in history began as forbidden thought. Every revolution began as forbidden doubt. Every great mind began as a quiet heretic studying truths others were afraid to see. So ask yourself now, what have you been taught not to question? Authority, morality, the narrative of your nation, the faith in your institutions, the limits of your potential. If forbidden knowledge is defined by threat, then your curiosity is the blade. Your courage to examine the unseen is the strike. And once your mind steps beyond the permitted boundaries, it never belongs to anyone else again. Now we move to the next keynote, where illusions give way to strategy and the visible world becomes merely a mask for the real battles unfolding beneath it. Appearances are not decoration, they are instruments. Weapons forged in silence, polished by intention, and wielded with absolute precision. In every era, ancient, medieval, or modern, the most powerful individuals were not the strongest, but the best at controlling what others thought they were. Ask yourself, when you look at someone, do you see who they are, or who they want you to believe they are? Most people never realize how easily perception guides their judgment. A confident tone convinces them of competence. A calm expression convinces them of control. A well-timed silence convinces them of authority, and a carefully crafted identity becomes more real to them than the actual human behind it. This is why rulers throughout history mastered the art of appearing. It was never vanity, it was strategy. Consider the story of Octavian, later known as Augustus. He entered Rome not as a conqueror, but as a savior. He dressed modestly, spoke gently, pretended to be restoring the Republic, while quietly dismantling it. He built monuments that celebrated peace, not dominance. And yet, behind the facade of harmony, he centralized more power than any Roman before him. His genius lay in understanding that people accept control willingly when it wears the disguise of benevolence. What disguises are worn around you today? Politicians who project empathy while calculating every gesture. Executives who appear humble while constructing empires in the shadows. Influencers who curate authenticity like a product. Even ordinary people craft illusions, carefully arranged lives displayed to evoke admiration, envy, or compliance. And what about you? Do you appear as you are, or as you think others need you to be? The truth is simple. Your appearance dictates your fate long before your actions do. People make decisions about you within seconds, decisions that shape trust, opportunity, respect, and influence. And because these judgments are unconscious, they feel inevitable. But here is where strategy begins. If perception is automatic, then controlling perception is power. Reflect on this. Have you ever noticed how someone becomes more attractive the moment they seem desired by others, or how someone appears more competent the moment they speak with certainty? This is not magic. It is psychological contagion. Humans mimic the judgments of the group, and the group mimics the judgments of the confident. This is why illusions dominate reality. People are guided not by truth, but by interpretation. Take the example of court politics in Renaissance Italy. A nobleman would wear richness not merely to impress, but to signal stability. The fabric of his clothing was a contract. The jewels were a declaration. And even the way he carried himself was a message. I am someone you cannot easily remove. Sometimes truth had nothing to do with it. Appearance did all the work. The same principle governs your environment today. Someone who appears disciplined is treated as disciplined, even if they lack consistency. Someone who appears knowledgeable is granted authority, even if their understanding is shallow. Someone who appears untouchable is rarely challenged, even if they are vulnerable. Humans see the mask and assume it is the face. Now consider how you might use this. If you wish to be respected, do you wait for respect, or do you construct the signals that command it? If you wish to be underestimated, do you hide your strength behind warmth and simplicity? If you wish to disarm rivals, do you appear agreeable while quietly learning their weaknesses? The strategist does not merely react to perception, he sculpts it. He chooses the shadows that conceal him and the light that reveals him. He knows that transparency is not a virtue, it is a disadvantage. Only a fool shows his true nature to the world, and then wonders why the world uses it against him. But understand this, controlling appearances is not deception for deception's sake. It is alignment, a deliberate shaping of the narrative surrounding you so that your intentions can move unopposed. Because if you don't define what people see, someone else will. And once they define you, they own the frame through which the world judges you. Now prepare for the next keynote, where the walls of illusion crumble further and we move from mastering what others see to mastering your very mind's escape from the cages built around it. Breaking free is not a moment of rebellion. It is a slow, deliberate unshackling of the mind you never realized was restrained. For most people, the cage is invisible. The bars are built from expectations, routines, inherited beliefs, and the quiet pressure to remain who you have always been. But you, if you are watching this, are already pushing against the door. Ask yourself, what is the strongest prison you've ever lived in? It wasn't a place. It was a thought someone planted in you. A belief about what you could be, what you deserved, what limits you should never cross. This is the architecture of internal control, more durable than any wall and far harder to escape. Throughout history, rulers understood that the easiest way to govern people was not through chains but through identity. Teach a man he is powerless, and he governs himself accordingly. Teach him he must obey, and he policies his own ambition. This is why empires invested more in myth than in metal. Weapons control bodies. Myths control minds. Consider the Spartan system. From childhood, boys were taught that fear was disgraceful, not eliminated, redefined. Their courage was not natural, it was engineered. The state rewired their emotions so completely that obedience became instinct. Imagine that level of conditioning, and then ask yourself, where in your own life has conditioning shaped your choices? Modern conditioning is softer, but just as effective. You are told to be realistic, humble, compliant, agreeable. You are encouraged to desire comfort over growth, validation over solitude, safety over audacity. And in the name of fitting in, you carry mental burdens that were never yours to begin with. The first step of mental escape is noticing the scripts. Scripts that tell you to avoid conflict. Scripts that warn you not to outgrow your peers. Scripts that whisper that stability is more important than self-respect. These scripts are written by families, cultures, media, institutions, and once internalized, they feel like your own voice. But are they? Reflect on this. How many of your fears are inherited? Fear of disappointing others, fear of being judged, fear of becoming an outsider, fear of failure. None of these fears belong to a free mind. They are introduced early to keep you aligned with a predictable path. A strategist sees these fears differently. He recognizes them as levers, tools used by those who wish to shape him. And once he identifies them, he begins the silent rebellion of unlearning. Think of the scholar in medieval Europe who taught himself to read forbidden texts. He was not merely absorbing information. He was dismantling the boundaries imposed on him. His mind stepped outside the map, and once outside, he could never return to the narrow corridor defined by the church. Every act of studying became an act of liberation. You, too, must study yourself in this way. Which beliefs empower you? Which beliefs weaken you? Which emotions serve your progress? Which emotions sabotage it? When you understand the architecture of your inner world, you discover the hidden exits paths you never noticed because you were taught not to see them. And do not underestimate the power of solitude in this process. Most people drown in the noise of the crowd, mistaking the crowd's voice for their own. You cannot hear your true ambition until the world's expectations fall silent. This is why every transformative figure in history withdrew before rising strategists, prophets, conquerors alike. Isolation clarifies, silence reveals. But escaping is not enough. You must rebuild. Once the illusions fall away, you must choose which beliefs to construct, which habits to forge, which identity to step into. Power is not the absence of control, it is the ability to control yourself with intention rather than with inherited patterns. And remember, when you escape your mental cage, you become unpredictable. Systems fear unpredictable people. They cannot anticipate your reactions, manipulate your emotions, or steer your decisions. Your independence becomes a quiet threat. So ask yourself now, are you prepared to become someone the world cannot easily influence? Someone who thinks outside the lines drawn for him? Someone who refuses to be shaped by anything except deliberate choice? Because the moment you master your inner freedom, you are no longer a product of your environment, you become its exception. And in the next keynote, we enter the realm where inner mastery transforms into outer influence, where understanding becomes strategy, and strategy becomes power. Influence does not begin with persuasion. It begins with understanding. You cannot shape the behavior of others until you can predict it, anticipate it, and recognize the invisible forces steering it. Once you understand these forces, influence becomes less of a performance and more of a quiet inevitability. Ask yourself this. How often do you try to convince people using logic, when what truly moves them is emotion, insecurity, or desire? Most individuals speak to the mind, forgetting that the mind is merely the servant of deeper impulses. If you wish to influence, you must speak to those impulses, not the mask they wear. Throughout history, those who mastered this distinction shaped nations. Consider the rise of Joan of Arc. She was not a warrior, nor a strategist by training. Her influence came from her ability to embody a narrative others desperately needed, a symbol of hope during chaos. People followed her not because her arguments were sound, but because her presence aligned with their longing for meaning. Understand this principle, and you see why influence is often a mirror, reflecting back what others crave to see. But influence without subtlety is domination, and domination without intelligence is fragile. Raw power forces obedience, but refined power invites it. When people believe they chose the path you intended, your control becomes invisible. Study the cunning approach of Cardinal Richelieu. He rarely issued direct commands. Instead, he shaped circumstances so that rivals walked into the traps they believed they were avoiding. He influenced kings by shaping the information they received. He influenced nobles by shaping the alliances they feared. He influenced a country by shaping the future they imagined. This is influence through architecture, building frameworks of thought rather than giving orders. Now consider your own life. How often have you been influenced without noticing? A colleague frames an idea as if it was partly yours, and you support it. A friend presents a choice in a way that makes one option feel obvious, and you comply. A charismatic figure speaks with certainty, and you instinctively trust them. Influence rarely announces itself. It whispers through framing, timing, tone, and suggestion. But once you understand these patterns, you can leverage them yourself. Begin with observation. Who does this person fear? What outcome do they desire? What contradiction do they hide? What story do they tell themselves about who they are? Every human being is built on habits and emotional shortcuts. When you recognize those shortcuts, you can guide decisions with the lightest touch. Consider the psychological tactic known as anchoring. Present a large option first, and every option afterward feels more reasonable. Merchants used this in ancient bazaars. Corporations use it now. You can use it anytime you want to steer a negotiation. Another tactic, social proof. People fear standing alone, so they follow what they perceive to be consensus. Leaders in medieval courts understood this. Before a proposal was made, they ensured influential nobles appeared already in favor. The crowd simply followed the illusion of unity. Then there is authority, the most misunderstood tool of all. Authority is not granted by titles, it is projected through certainty, composure, and consistency. If your tone contradicts your message, people sense weakness. If your emotions betray you, people sense instability. Influence begins the moment others conclude you are someone they can rely on or someone they cannot afford to oppose. But influence extends beyond individuals. It shapes environments, it alters narratives, it bends groups. When you subtly guide the mood of a room, you influence the decisions made inside it. When you plant ideas in conversations without appearing attached to them, you influence outcomes without taking responsibility. And here lies the highest form of influence. When people believe your conclusion was theirs, that is the moment you stop persuading and begin shaping reality. So ask yourself now, how different would your life look if you mastered this art? How many conflicts would disappear? How many opportunities would open? How many outcomes could you quietly redirect in your favor? The world is not ruled by the loud, but by the strategically quiet, by those who understand that influence is the architecture behind every decision, every alliance, every rise, and every downfall. Because once you master influence, you no longer compete for power. You design the stage on which power is decided. And now we move toward the closing revelations of this journey, where all the scattered strategies converge into one final lesson about the nature of control itself. In the end, the greatest power is the one that leaves no fingerprints. When you guide people without appearing to guide them, you move through the world like a silent architect, shaping choices, redirecting emotions, bending outcomes with nothing more than suggestion and calculated presence. Influence becomes effortless when others believe the decisions they make are their own. And that is the secret most rulers, leaders, and manipulators have always understood. You don't force obedience. You cultivate it. You let people walk into the path you built, convinced they discovered it themselves. Ask yourself, how much stronger could you become if those around you never realized you were steering the entire game? If you found value in this lesson, speak your mind in the comments. Your perspective reveals the strategies you're ready to master. If you want more psychological and philosophical tactics sharpened to a blade's edge, subscribe. And if you know someone who should not walk through this world blind, share this video with them. Control spreads quietly when you allow it to.